Hi, this is Bill. I'm the salty old Marine. Let's talk about Nexus letters. What is a Nexus letter? Well, when we're talking about VA disability, a Nexus letter is something that connects your service event. So in other words, what originally happened to you to cause your disability while you were in the service, and your current diagnosis. So for example, if you suffered, let's say, sleep apnea. We made a video about sleep apnea. While you were in the service, and you have a current diagnosis of sleep apnea, what connects the two of them? In other words, if the VA says your sleep apnea that you currently have was probably caused by something other than your in-service event, how do you connect the two? Well, that's where a Nexus letter comes in. A Nexus letter is a written medical opinion. It comes from a doctor. It states that your disability is at least as likely as not connected to your military service. There are different levels of connection, so the letter might say it is more likely than not. Or it might even say the strongest possible terms, it is connected to your military service. But for VA purposes, at least as likely as not, roughly 50-50, is sufficient. So the VA requires a clear link between your current condition and your service. So a strong Nexus letter can provide that link. The VA will deny your claim if it cannot prove a service connection. If you were denied due to lack of evidence, and it will say that on your claim letter that you get from the VA, a Nexus letter for an appeal can help you win. If you have a condition caused by an already service-connected disability, then a Nexus letter can help you with that. As an example, let's say you have a service connection for PTSD and you are filing a claim for sleep apnea. If you don't have a diagnosis of sleep apnea from while you were in the service, you might be able to claim a secondary disability of sleep apnea secondary to PTSD. But that's where you need the Nexus letter. The Nexus letter will provide the evidence and the diagnosis that says it is at least as likely as not that your current sleep apnea was caused by or made worse by your service-connected PTSD. So for that, a Nexus letter is required. It can offset bad C&P exams. So if you are sent to a compensation and pension exam, a C&P exam, and it doesn't go well for you, this can help offset it. So when you go to a C&P exam, that examiner will be writing a Nexus letter. You won't see it, but it's there. It's in the record, and it will say whether or not the C&P examiner thinks it's at least as likely as not that your current claim is related to your original diagnosis. If they say less likely than not, your claim will be denied. If you have a Nexus letter that says the opposite, at least as likely as not, then that's considered something called equipoise. What that means is one medical expert says yes, one medical expert says no. So if the C&P examiner does not think your condition is connected, but you have a Nexus letter from a professional that states that it is connected and why, that is considered equipoise, and according to VA rules, the veteran wins. So you would get the claim in those cases, and if you do not, you would have a very legitimate appeal. Nexus letters are good if you don't have direct proof in your service records. So, for example, an injury that you had diagnosed while you were in the service, right? If your claim was denied due to what they call lack of medical evidence, or if you're filing a secondary claim like we just talked about. A good Nexus letter, it has to be written by a medical professional. So an MD, a DO, some sort of a specialist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, probably not like a chiropractor, right? Probably not like a massage therapist. I mean, it's possible, but maybe not, right? So you want it written by a licensed medical professional. It has to say that they reviewed your medical records, VA and private. So you'll have to provide them with your medical records and they'll have to look at them. It has to use the correct legal language. So it has to say, at least as likely as not. Direct quote. It has to say that. It has to say why your condition is service-connected. So it's not just enough to say, yep, it's connected. You're going to have to say, or the doctor is going to have to say, why it's service-connected. Maybe some scientific studies or some very strong legal reasoning that explains exactly how the two things are connected. It has to be clear, it has to be professional, it has to be detailed. It cannot be vague. Not if you want the VA to take it seriously. So how do you get a strong Nexus letter? Well, you're going to have to find a qualified doctor. That can be difficult. Many private doctors are not VA experienced, and many VA doctors will not write a Nexus letter. They are allowed to. It's not against the rules, it's not against the law, but many VA doctors think so. And apparently it's very difficult to disabuse them of that notion. So you may end up having to pay a professional medical person for a Nexus letter. Now that's a decision I can't make for you. It may not be the best thing in the world. You may not want to pay that money. You may not have that money to pay, but it might be a good option. You have to provide the medical records to that medical professional. They need to be able to review those medical records to see that what you're claiming is exactly what's in the medical records. How can they make a determination without that? You're going to need that, again, very detailed letter, and the wording has to be correct. That whole at least as likely as not thing. Now, if you're a person who has a private doctor, and that private doctor is willing to write a Nexus letter, fantastic. But you might have to coach them, educate them, exactly how a Nexus letter must be written. We're going to put a link in the description. If you're paying for a Nexus letter, well, that professional already knows how a Nexus letter has to be written. So, food for thought there. Here's some common mistakes that get Nexus letters ignored by the VA. Vague or weak statements. So if a doctor says this might be service-connected, that's not going to fly. And no explanation. So if the Nexus letter writer says, oh yeah, this is definitely more likely than not service-connected, and they don't explain why, it's also not going to fly. Wrong terminology. Now again, I keep saying at least as likely as not. Those are specific words that the VA needs to see. At least as likely as not, more likely than not, or connected, but not, yeah, probably. That won't fly. Or an unqualified provider. So, unfortunately, the person who does the manicure and pedicure, probably not a good person to talk about your PTSD, for example. A chiropractor, a therapist, a nurse, maybe in some circumstances, but honestly, I wouldn't count on it. Look for a doctor. Look for a doctor or a specialist qualified in the field that you're claiming. Where do you get Nexus letters? Again, primary care doctor if they're willing to write one and if they'll write it correctly. Private VA specialized doctors, again, some of them charge fees, but they write strong letters because this is something that they do to earn money. Telemedicine services for VA claims. Some online doctors do specialize in Nexus letters. And VSOs may know doctors who can provide free or no-cost Nexus letters because some doctors, again, will and some doctors will not. So, in conclusion, is a Nexus letter something you should do? That's really up to you. There are cases where it's going to strengthen your case, And the expense of paying for a Nexus letter can be offset by the claim that you are awarded, if you think about it that way. So if you pay a certain amount of money to get a Nexus letter, a strong Nexus letter from a qualified professional, and it helps you win your claim, and you get X amount of money per month, well, how long will it take for that to offset the money you paid for the Nexus letter? And what if your claim is denied even with the Nexus letter, right? So you're going to have to evaluate for yourself the strength of your claim. You're going to have to look at, is it worth paying money to get a Nexus letter to get, say, for example, a 0% disability rating or a 10% disability rating? Maybe that's not something you want to spend your hard-earned money on. Makes sense, right? In other cases, it's absolutely worth it in terms of what you might get if your case is strong and you believe in it and there's no other way to get that service connection, right? So Nexus letters, yeah, a valuable tool. Not for everybody, not for every claim, but if they're the right tool at the right time for your claim, then they might be worth it. This is Bill. I am the Salty Old Marine. I hope you found this video helpful. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, tell a friend, leave a comment, and as always, have a great day.